welcome back. My name is Kevin Doyle, and I am the HGSI's Assistant Director of Programs and Operations. We are here today for the final installment of the Spatial Data Science Workshop Series. Before we get started, I want to thank our partners again at Esri and the Harvard Center for Geographic Analysis for making this workshop possible. It's now my pleasure to reintroduce Lauren Bennett, who leads the Spatial Analysis Software Development Team at Esri. Lauren.
Hi, everybody. I am thrilled to be here this morning and to have the opportunity to kind of set a little bit of context for how this third workshop in our series of 3 workshops kind of fits into the bigger picture, and then pass it off to my colleagues who are going to take over for today. So far in this 3 workshop series, we spent the first week talking about statistical clustering, finding spatial clusters using statistics. And in the second session, we talked about finding spatial clusters using machine learning techniques. And talking about spatial data science without talking about the importance of effective storytelling really is a big missed opportunity in our minds. We can do really incredible analysis, but if we're not able to communicate how it works, why it's important, what it means, then really our analysis doesn't have the impact that we intend it to have. And most of the time we're doing analysis not for the sake of it, but to make an impact, right? To drive decisions, to help people understand the situation better so that they can make better decisions. And if they can't use those information products that we create to do that, then kind of what was the point of our analysis in the first place? So one of the things that I talk about a lot is this idea that, there is this explosion in terms of the importance that people place on analytics these days, which is amazing for those of us who have spent our careers or going into careers in analysis, in data science and statistics. But it also means that decision makers are being given a lot of analysis, a lot of information products, some which are incredibly valuable and valid, and some that are less so. And the reality is most of the time, those decision makers don't necessarily have all of the tools that, let's say, we have for judging those information products and deciding what to use to make decisions. And so oftentimes, as much as we would love for the decisions to get made based on just the best science, actually, oftentimes we're competing with less good science for what's the most compelling story being told. And so not only do we have to focus on doing the best science, but we also have to focus on telling the most compelling stories with that great science so that it is our great science that's being used to make those decisions. And today we're going to hear from our StoryMaps team who are dedicated to tools that really help us do that in this incredibly effective way. Maps are this beautiful way of telling stories that can make even very abstract, oftentimes what feels like very intangible, sophisticated, complicated data science, machine learning techniques feel really personal and important, because it's hard to ignore something when it's your house on the map, or your grandmother's house on the map, or the place that you grew up on the map. And so it really takes these intangible things and makes them tangible. So it's an incredibly powerful way to share the results of our analysis, and that's really the focus today. I also want to mention just one piece of logistics, which is associated with this workshop series. There is a competition being run through the Harvard Data Science Initiative, furnished by the Harvard Data Science Initiative, which involves some pretty big monetary prizes and also the potential for the top 3 story maps to be published as part of the Harvard Data Science Review. So that's a huge opportunity, and the details about that will be sent out to all registrants of both this workshop and also the previous 2 next week. So keep an eye out for that and hopefully participate in that competition, because we're really looking forward to seeing your work and how you can take kind of what's been going on in these 3 weeks and turn it into something amazing. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Ross, who is a member of the StoryMaps team, is going to be leading us through telling these compelling stories today.
Thanks so much, Lauren, and thank you all for being here today. We're thrilled to be able to share the storytelling techniques with you all. Like Lauren mentioned, I'm Ross Donahue. I'm part of the Esri's StoryMaps team. I'm joined by my colleagues, Jen, Liz, and Du from our team. We will be using the chat and Q&A feature throughout the webinar to be able to answer your questions and make sure that we're making this as useful as possible. We'll be sharing our screens and doing some live demonstrations where you can build along with us and start to become familiar with the tools and techniques that we're talking about. I'm going to hand things over to Jen to share some story examples to get the conversation started.
I'm just going to share a few story examples with you just to get your creative juices flowing on what you would like to do for your story later today. And I chose a few examples that I thought highlighted the one, really good examples, but also two, they highlighted creative uses of ArcGIS StoryMaps. Now, ArcGIS StoryMaps is a storytelling tool available to you with your ArcGIS Online organization, and you'll see how to get started with that later on today. And this storytelling tool helps you, as Lauren mentioned, provide meaningful context for your hard work, for your analysis, for your GIS work. And it makes it easy for people to understand really complex methodologies or research or results. So here's a story on shade equity in Los Angeles. And here we've got a compelling introduction. We see that just streets a few blocks from each other have such different experiences, especially when it comes to tree canopy coverage. We have, we always recommend images of people to make it relatable, personal, add that human element to your story. Can't just be all numbers and words. Here we've got video and stats that just call out important information. So 73% of Angelenos surveyed reported bus stops lacking shade. Some interesting quotes. Just because it's called StoryMaps doesn't mean it has to have a map in it. But of course, we love maps here. Here we see a swipe comparison between areas with tree coverage in dark green. And on the right, we see impervious surfaces. Now, of course, we would most likely want a legend somewhere in the map or in the text itself. Here we have a timeline of the history. So when we're speaking about environmental injustices, racial equity, we want to provide that historical context of, how we got there, why we are experiencing what we're experiencing today. So here's a timeline that shows different points in time with images connected to it. You can get creative. You don't have to use the timeline for a timeline. It could be like a list of bulleted points, for example. With Arcgis Online, you also get access to other apps like Dashboard and Insights and Business Analysts. And these apps are a great way to showcase your work in a way that's easy to understand. You can easily bring those in to the story and provide meaningful context. And of course, we always like to end the story with a call to action. Here we have an embedded survey. And once you fill out that survey, your response automatically appears on the map, and you can share your experience in the city, for example. And another call to action is to learn more. And here are some helpful resources. So that's one story. The next story is the lines that shape our cities. And it talks about inequalities to redlining policies of the 1930s. And here we start off with a map. And this is just a hypothetical situation. Imagine this part of the city, they're describing it as positive, green, trees, green, woods. So when you're creating your stories, think about the color theory and the connotation with different colors, and then the slow reveal, right? We didn't immediately start with this map. So the slow reveal is great for ensuring that people are with you and they understand your flow. Again, that similar theme, we always want to provide that history. And here's another timeline. Add maps from Arcgis Online, or if you have a print map, you can also add that as an image. Historical documents. This is what we call a legend. So a legend using text in the story. So not your typical legend. These full screen images. And now we go into different parts of different cities and different topics, right? So there's heat light islands, tree coverage, impervious surfaces, topography. So we're using this navigation bar to jump through the story. And you can add your maps as well. And this is what we call map choreography. So I'm just scrolling. So me as the author, I would use map choreography to guide people through the story, right? So it's almost as if I'm there with the reader saying, look at all of Oakland. As you zoom down, I want your eyes to focus on the Melrose area, for example. Maps can be in 2D or 3D. So our goal is just to guide the readers to understanding, right? And as they say, understanding precedes action, right? So this is the whole point of the story, is to get people to understand your research. Here's another story, uses a really cool 3D animation. It's called Where Do They Go? And it's exploring bird population and migration using one of those apps I mentioned earlier called Insights. These are hand-drawn images, and then they uploaded the image to the story. These are interactive charts. You can add that R² line value if you want. Here, we've got this color scheme that works throughout, consistent, and it's interactive. So I love this story. It's fun to read, beautiful. So you could see that you could take your story in any direction, but the main goal is to provide understanding. And lastly, similar to that survey example I shared in the first story, here's a really fun one. It uses the 3D map tour, and this is great for public engagement, right? People providing data for you and their experiences. And the way they do that is by going to that survey, adding their favorite picture, little title, and what they like about that place. And I'll show you that survey at the very end here. And it's very easy to create a survey using Survey123. Just takes a few minutes. Put your location, put your name of the place, optionally put your name and where do you live, and upload your image. Right when you hit submit, it shows up on the map. So those are just a few examples. Hopefully helps you just think about what you want to do for your story later. So I'm going to turn it back over to Ross, and he'll share how to plan your story.
Thanks a lot, Jen. What you just saw were a series of completed stories. These are stories where there's maybe took months to develop. Now, I think one of the hardest things is taking a second and pausing before you jump into the tool or jump into looking at photos and things to actually plan out your story. And I think oftentimes folks, a common pitfall is folks jump into the tool and waste a lot of time just kind of experimenting with things without having a plan for where they want to go with the story and how they want to structure it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to plan out a story, some of the common pitfalls that we've seen, and some techniques for getting started. And then we'll start to transition into the tools that you can use to help create your story that really drives that action. And so, where I want to start is, say you've got this story idea, you're really excited about it for the competition or just in life. What comes next? And I argue that you need to start with a plan, sort of this scaffolding to build your story around. I think it's important to start really high level and think about what's the purpose of your story? Why are you making it in the first place? Are you trying to educate your audience about a topic? Are you trying to raise awareness for a cause? Think about, what does success look like? And what do you want your readers to know when they finish the story? This will help set the scope for your story and sort of set you on the right path towards effective storytelling. In addition, I always recommend thinking about your audience. Before you get into the tools, think about who you're trying to reach with your story. Now, oftentimes we aspire to have a story go viral, have so many views, but I would argue that it's more about having the right eyes view your story than having, it go viral. And to do that, you need to really target your audience. Oftentimes, I talk with folks about stories they're developing and they say, I want my story to reach a general audience. And I think that's a great starting point, but I would push you to go a little bit further and think about, what are your readers interested in? Are we talking about a younger audience or an older audience? And so in doing so, this will help shape the different design decisions, the language you use in your story, and again, make a more effective story and narrative as opposed to sort of creating this beautiful thing only to find out that it doesn't resonate with your audience. Other questions to think about is, how much does your audience know about this story topic already? What reading level should it be at? How can you make your story more relevant and memorable to that audience? I add this photo of dogs because these little puppies, if you want a story to go viral, you'd have pictures of little puppies and people might take a look at it and get a lot of views, but it wouldn't really spur a lot of impact, right? It's just kind of clickbait. You're gonna see it, love it, enjoy it, maybe share it, but again, it's not sort of having that impact that you're trying to have. I think it's also worth pausing and thinking about, is this story worth telling? There's tons of content out there. And like Lauren was mentioning earlier, there's all of this analysis that you can do. But if you haven't really thought about what the story is behind it and how it's unique or different, then your story is going to be less effective. It won't have as big an impact. This again comes back to the motivations behind making this story in the first place. Why? What is the purpose? Start there and then think about the how and the what you're going to make. Think about, has this story already been done? And if so, maybe push your idea a little bit further. Ask for feedback on the idea to get a different perspective. These are all ways to really craft your story to be unique and more effective. Once you're feeling good about your audience and purpose, think about how you want to structure your story to be more effective. Will it be character-based? Are you going to bring in sort of first-person narrative, or are you going to have quotes from experts? How are you going to keep your readers engaged from start to finish? Thinking about, this gets back to your scope of your story. Do you want it to be a long 20-minute reading experience, or, more of like a 3 to 5 minute reading experience? This will help you sort of make decisions and make the story crafting process a lot easier. Now, this is all kind of abstract, so let's look at some examples. So our team has developed this worksheet that just helps guide readers as they're in this creative process of developing a story. So first, it has you think about the what and why, the elevator pitch. What is the purpose of your story? And so this should just be 1 or 2 sentences, not very long. 2, who is your intended audience? Again, we're trying to get past that sort of general audience. We want everybody to read it and think more about targeted individuals. It sounds like for this competition, there's already an audience sort of defined, and so that can help be a starting point for the story already. Number 3, what are the key takeaways for readers? Now, there's only so much a reader can retain as they kind of go through this digital content. Attention spans are very short on the web. And so being clear about what those key takeaways are from the beginning will help help you shape your story and keep the scope in check. Number 4, does your story have a call to action? For a reader, it can be really frustrating if after spending the time reading your document or your story, they have no next step. And so a really effective storytelling technique is to have a call to action, have something that your readers can do as a next step. That can be as simple as, visit this website to learn more about X, Y, and Z. Show up for this event that's coming up. Those kinds of things. The second half of this document really gets into organizing your content. So thinking about what content you have and what content you need. So that can be, anything from media, photos, videos, audio, map, graphs, and infographics. It can also come down to what content you actually still need and don't have yet. Because this is kind of a data-driven audience, I think this is really important to think about what data sources you have, what analysis have you already done, and what do you need to continue to do to fit the narrative that you're trying to tell. And then lastly, but certainly not least important, is thinking about how you're going to distribute your story. I've seen it happen all the time where people create these beautiful, beautiful stories only to, publish them without a plan, and their audience doesn't end up seeing them. And it's kind of this wasted effort. You can do a ton of analysis, but if your audience isn't seeing your content, then why did you do it in the first place? And so having a general plan on what sorts of outlets you're going to use to distribute your story is really important to do at the very beginning. Now, we've done this for a story and have shared this here. So just to drive home sort of how this planning document can be helpful. So later on in the session, we'll be doing a build along where you'll actually, if you want to, take content that we've developed and create a story around it related to shade equity analysis. And so what we've done is we've filled in this sheet to show you what an example of this planning process can look like. So here, that elevator pitch, I'll zoom in a little bit. What is the purpose of your story? The purpose is to communicate the importance of tree coverage in cities and show how spatial data science can inform discussions and planning decisions around shade equity in the United States. You can see in the audience section, we've got a primary audience as well as a secondary audience, thinking about local stakeholders, thinking about communities that are impacted by this. We've got key takeaways that are pretty simple and very specific. That way we can, as we make the story, we can come back to this and make sure that we're hitting those points. Call to action. What content do we have? What do we need? Again, data, what do we have? What do we need? We'll distribute through social media and our newsletter. Okay? So hopefully that provides some tools for thinking about how to plan your story effectively before you get into the tool. Now, this is really focused on digital storytelling, but you could imagine that being helpful for other things like presentations that you give and things like that. Now, something that I love to do after I've kind of got that high level plan is I love to create a little storyboard. Storyboarding is a technique used by a lot of different creatives. Maybe most popular is filmmakers. They use storyboards to sort of scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. I think the storyboard process is really helpful for starting to push your vision for your story a little bit further, to be able to communicate that vision to other people who might be involved in the story process. And then again, putting some more structure into that scaffolding of how your story is going to get from this idea into a beautiful narrative. So again, starting out with the cover image, showing green infrastructure in a city. This is, again, thinking about this shade equity analysis story. Then we're going to move into some text, talking about green infrastructure. We're going to add some really nice visual elements to keep my reader engaged throughout the story. This is going to be an image gallery that will reinforce the key points. I'll add an immersive section where we show maps as well as images. And then we'll have a call to action and conclusion and add credits for the story and the data that was used. So again, the storyboard process doesn't have to be super detailed. Oftentimes I'll just sketch little stick figures, and I think it can be a really helpful technique for, again, communicating your ideas, having a plan, and then executing that plan. So after you've created your storyboard, you have a general plan for where you want your story to go, what you need, what you have, it's time to start talking about the tools. And some of you might be thinking, I thought this was going to be a hands-on workshop. Why aren't we seeing the tools? I think, it's really, we've taken this time to really emphasize the need to plan and think through your story before you get to the tools. So I'm happy to announce that we're going to dig into those tools now. So the first tool we're going to talk about is ArcGIS Online. And then we'll have a little break and then come back, and Jen will lead us through a build-along demonstration of ArcGIS StoryMaps, which is another product. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what ArcGIS Online is, it's really Esri's cloud mapping and analysis solution. Now, what does that mean? Online, Esri has these tools that you can access through ArcGIS Online to create maps, do analysis, and also create web maps. You can do 2D maps, 3D maps. There's also this amazing repository of data sets that Esri has curated in something called the Living Atlas of the World. You can bring those data sets into your stories, into your maps, and really get started using it. So this ecosystem is all web-based, and it allows you to sort of not have to use desktop apps like ArcGIS Pro or some of the other tools that were maybe demoed in this webinar series. You can do that all through ArcGIS Online. I'm using web-based tools. So let's take a little look. And my colleagues are probably putting in some links to ArcGIS Online, and there's so much up there and so much to learn about ArcGIS Online. For the scope of this presentation, I'll just sort of touch on the high level of what's possible and what it's all about. So here I am in ArcGIS Online. I'm going to sign in to my account. And if you're interested in the tools that we show today, some of you might have an account already, but you can access these tools through Harvard's GeoCenter. They will set you up with an account. And again, you have access to all this stuff that I'll show today. So I've logged into my organizational account. For those of you who are on this webinar, you would log into your Harvard organization, like I just did. And then you can see up at this top here, you have the ability to look at maps, create maps, use something called Scene. This is Esri's 3D mapping solution. There's Notebook, which is, this is using Jupyter notebooks and Python script to be able to run analytics. You can develop groups. This is how you can collaborate with other folks in your organization and work with each other. You've got this content option. The content is all of the maps you create are housed in this content area. And then you've got your organization tab where you can actually see other things that have been created by folks in your organization. Those can be maps and other things that the resources that you can use. Now, one little icon that is really helpful is this one right here. It's these 9 sort of dots here. When you click on that, it enables all of these different web apps. Web apps are products like ArcGIS StoryMaps, which allow you to do anything from data analytics to storytelling to dashboards and survey 1, 2, 3. So create surveys using spatial data. So let me just show you really briefly the 2D mapping environment here. This is where you can do things like smart mapping, where you take data sets and you run analysis on them. So here we are. This is kind of the map viewer area. You can see the different layers you can add. You can change the base map really easily to match the style for your story. You have an imagery based maps can be really helpful. You can also customize these with other tools. Now let's just go with an imagery based map for now. And you can add layers really easily. Now again, you can do that through my content. This is some interesting lionfish data. And you can see this is temporal data. So as I use this time slider, you can see this change on the map. So again, you can make custom maps, but you can also bring in data from your organization or from what I was referring to earlier, Living Atlas of the World. So this is one of my favorite new data sets. It's this land cover data. It's very high resolution and it allows you to see change over time, how land cover looks right now and classifies them. So what I'll do is I'll just turn off my lionfish layer for now, and we can just look at this data and how high resolution it is. And there's a lot you can do with the data itself to style it and to make it look nicer. There's these new blend modes for those of you who have some experience with graphic design. You know, this multiply blend mode can be a really powerful way to drape really detailed data sets on top of base maps. So here you can see that in red is kind of urban areas, and you can see it aligns really nicely. And again, it just starts to tell a story really quickly without needing tons and tons of text. One of the most powerful things is once you make a map like this, you can incorporate it into your other mapping tools. So you can save this map and then incorporate it into StoryMaps, for instance, or another web app that you're creating. It's really easy for these different tools to integrate with one another and speak to each other. So that's a little bit of an example of how you can make 2D maps. Let me go back and show you, I'll go back to the home here and show you how we can make a 3D map. So if we click on scene, this is Esri's kind of 3D mapping experience. I'll create a new scene. And again, you can see this layers panel over here. Let's add some data. Let's go to Living Atlas again. And we'll go to that land cover layer. And we'll change our base map to this imagery. And for this, I'm just going to zoom in on this aerial map because I really love looking at I really like just zooming around and being able to use 3D for storytelling can really help communicate what it looks like on the ground. So here's Kilimanjaro, and you can see that, you know, if you incorporated this into your story, say you're talking about, you know, tourism in Tanzania, it's a really powerful way to communicate information and keep your readers engaged throughout the process. So again, you can just save this and then incorporate it into your other storytelling activities or for presentations or any number of uses. Again, it's really easy to change the base map from one to the next. We've used scenes for a number of stories that we've done on our team to really communicate the topography and how that influences different factors. Okay, let's see. So again, there's a whole slew of ways you can use Esri's cloud solution here. Again, Arcgis Online, there's so much you can do. There's lots of learning resources that we'll provide if you want to go deeper into this. I think I'll just touch base again on these web apps. So these apps allow you to do really powerful things. I'll just show Survey 123 really quickly because, well, I love this tool because it allows you to create map-based surveys really easily. So you can have people submit latitude and longitude and descriptions, whether it's about wildlife sightings or sharing your favorite places around the world, like Jen demonstrated a little bit earlier. Again, it's super easy to get started. It's all web-based, so you don't need to download software on your computer and worry about updates. It's always updating in the cloud, and it's saved in the cloud as well. Okay, so with that, what I want to do is share a content folder with you all so you can try out ArcGIS Online, and one of the really powerful functionalities of it, which is you can actually share content packages. So I just, I'm going to share with everybody in the chat this link. When you click on it, it's in the chat now. When you click on it, you'll go to this page here. So what this is it's hosted in ArcGIS Online, and this is just a zipped folder of images. There's a text document in there, and I want you to download that if you are going to be building a story along with us. You're also more than welcome to just watch and follow along, or use your own content as Jen does her demonstration.
So today, so far, you've seen examples of different stories, and I'm going to share my screen real quick. You've seen examples of different stories. Turn on autoplay, that's a fun one, that highlight your data science. You heard of storytelling tips from Ross. How do you tell an effective story? How do you plan your story? Some people jump right in. What I do is I open up a text document and I create my outline, write my text, get all the images I need, and put it into the story. So that's making a plan. You also heard from Ross a quick overview of ArcGIS Online. It was fun for me to see the mapping capabilities, blending modes, layer effects that really highlight your data and highlight your analysis, right? So the next step in this process is putting it into a story, and I want to show you how easy it is to create that story. Let's just stop this autoplay mode. And this is the story you're going to create. It's a shade equity analysis story, similar to the first one I showed earlier today. And you're going to learn how to add images, excuse me, text, image galleries, insights. I know there was a question about insights, the swipe tool, and I accidentally hit back with my mouse. 1 second. Got the swipe tool, different map actions. So you're going to learn how to do all of this. And the call to actions. It's a very short story, and we did that on purpose to ensure that we're able to build it all together in the next half hour. So I think we have an hour, but I don't think it'll take that long. All right, so in the chat, you will see this link, and I believe Ross shared it, and we can reshare that in the chat, and you'll hit download. And this is a zipped file. And what you'll do, if you haven't done so already, is extract these files, into one of your folders. And this includes the images used in the story, the images for the swipe, as well as the text document. This looks like you might need to enable editing. Okay, so I'm just going to pull it over to my other screen. And here we go. So you have your document set up. You've got your images downloaded. Let's go into the story builder. And Ross showed this to you already, but I'm going to do it again for those of you following along. So when you log in to your ArcGIS Online account, you'll see something like this, but it's going to look different for your organization, but you'll see a similar heading bar over here. Again, that's also in the chat. If you haven't signed up for ArcGIS Online, all of you get it with your organization. So log in, I think, with one of your keys. Here in the top right, you can create a story by accessing the app launcher, or you can go to your content. So here's the content tab at the top, and create an app. And one of those is ArcGIS StoryMaps. This takes you to the page. What I do is I bookmark this page in my browser, so I go straight to it. Before I start the story, actually, I want to show you my projects. So when you access ArcGIS StoryMaps, you can create a story. You can put all those stories into a collection, and you can theme your stories and collection to have a certain look and feel. Okay, so we're back at the builder. You can put a title to your story, so something short and sweet. And what I'm doing is I'm copying the title here in the document and pasting it into the story. So if you're following along, that's exactly what I'm doing. We might want a short and catchy title, maybe a description. Now let's add a cover image. So you can upload your image for the title. So here I've got my folder that I extracted, and here's the cover image. You can either drag and drop the file here, or you can select Browse Files. There are many different cover styles you can choose from. So this one is called the minimal style. We have the side-by-side. This is one of my favorites. It's very clean cut. And then you can choose the full cover, and you can move the text down if you like. All right, so we're scrolling down. We're now introduced to the content block. So it's a block-based builder. You can add text, buttons, maps, image galleries, videos, timeline. So all of these phrases we talked about when we were sharing those story examples. If you don't know what it is, you can hover over it to see what it looks like. You can embed different items or different sites into your story. So let's copy and paste the text found in your document. And we're just going to copy and paste the first two paragraphs. If you see some weird formatting like this, I think it might be because it's the Word document formatting. Let's see if this works. We might be able to clear all formatting, and let's see if that makes a difference. So I just selected clear formatting at the top, and let's have it go. Let's have a go and see if that fixes it. All right. Well, we'll just work with this. Okay, so I'm just cleaning it up a little bit here. Not sure why this is happening, but once you get it looking like this, you can select the text and you can change the text style to heading, subheading, paragraph, large paragraph, bulleted list, numbered list, and quotes. So for this one, let's select the first paragraph and change it to heading. Okay, next we want to add a quote block. And we're just going to select both of these and paste that. So select the next two paragraphs and paste that into your story. Again, I apologize for the formatting issue, but we can fix that here. And as I fix it, that also gives you time to copy and paste. So with this paragraph that starts with shade equity, you can highlight it and we'll change it to the quote style. So what's nice about this is we could have easily pasted all the text here and have it all uniform and all the same size, but it doesn't catch people's attention. And the change in size and in color and formatting helps people engage more with your story, makes it more visually engaging. Here we want to call something out using the quote block. Okay, so next up in the Word doc, you'll see image gallery. And I see that there's an issue here with the text. I'm going to fix it real quick. All right, so next up, we've got the image gallery. So if you select that block selector, there's an image gallery here. You select that. And here you can upload your photos. So let's go to my photos. And what you could do is either browse your files or again, select them. And I just clicked on one and I clicked shift. So that selects them all, or you can click and drag. And I'm just going to drag this over here. It's really easy to reorder your photos however you like. You could do it now or you can do it later. And once it's, to your liking, you can create the gallery. I recommend that your photos be under a megabyte, right? But if it's a large photo, we'll automatically resize it for you so that it's, for your readers, it'll be a quick load time. So here we have an image gallery. And like I mentioned earlier, including people's faces and action brings your story to life and makes it more personable. You can change the size, small, medium, full screen for that dramatic effect. You can change the layout from jigsaw to maybe dynamic squares. So it depends on what you're going for. I kind of like this look, so I'll keep it at the medium size. Just a quick mention, if you want to have best practices or follow best practices, you can select the settings cog for each of the images and add attribution. So who took the image? You might want to highlight it, give the person's name, put a link to their site. Another best practice is to add alternative text. So if someone is using a screen reader, it will read and describe the images and the maps and other things in your story for them. Makes your story more accessible. Also, if you expect a lot of your readers to view your story on mobile or smaller devices, you can move the focal point to ensure that they see the part of the picture that you really want them to see if it's going to get cropped on mobile. Here we've got the little attribution that shows up. So subtle, but available. Okay, next on the document, we've got a little paragraph to break up the story. So we don't want too many maps in a row or too much text in a row or too many images in a row. So there are different strategies to break up your story. And notice how these, the text is short and sweet. right? That's the difficult part, is we want to write so much, but it's a true skill if you can keep it down to something as short as possible. All right, next up in the Word document, we've got the embed block. So I'm going to copy this iframe, and it doesn't have to be an iframe. You can paste any URL. The reason I'm using an iframe is because I want to set the width and the height of my Insights embed to a specific size. You can copy and paste a YouTube link. You can copy and paste a website. You can use these out of the box sizing, small, medium, and large. But in this case, I wanted to have a little bit more control. So this is what we call interactive embed. So now your readers can interact with your chart and learn more information. This is ArcGIS Insights. There's something called an embed card, which we recommend at the end of the story. You can pull in different information. But for now, let's keep this as an interactive embed. And as a reminder, the way I did that was I went to the embed block and I just pasted in that iframe that's available in the document. So another way to break up your story is to add a separator. So here I'll separate a little visual cue that, all right, we're moving from the intro of our story. Now let's go to the body of the story. And something that we like to do on our team is use the sidecar immersive. And we call it an immersive because it's full screen. It immerses the reader into a more zoomed in experience with this scrolling panel. So you can choose any of the styles. There's the floating or the docked. I chose docked, the docked layout. And this is what we call a sidecar. And notice here, the text on the left scrolls as I'm scrolling the mouse, right? So let's fill this in. The reader will not see this bar at the bottom. It's kind of like a film strip, right? Like if we add another slide, we start to see what each slide looks like. So let's add some text. I'm going to copy the 2 paragraphs, starting with in Los Angeles. Remove this space here. And I can change this to a subheading, or maybe I want a heading. Now I recommend using the heading if you want to activate your navigation bar. And the navigation bar is great because it can jump people to different parts of the story. So I'll turn that on. You go to Design at the top and toggle on that navigation bar. And now it recognizes the headings that you've added. It shows it up here. What you can do is say, change the text. So maybe that's my intro. Maybe this section is about tree coverage. And if I hit save, now it cleans up the text shown on the nav bar. And you can easily click to move to the different section. Another great reason to use the navigation bar is that it serves as a kind of like an outline or a table of contents for your readers. They get to see what to expect in the story. Okay, so as a recap, if you click on that little settings, you can change the text, or you can turn it off too. So you can use a heading without having it connected to the navigation bar. Changing the text up here does not change the text in the story. So now let's add media. And we're going to add a swipe with 2 images. So there are different media types you can add to this panel here. You can add images, videos, maps, embeds, so embedding a link, or a swipe. So let's add a swipe. And here we have different options. You can compare 2 different images, 2 different maps, or 2 different express maps. Express maps are like a very easy way of creating a map. You don't have to have GIS experience whatsoever. So with adding an image, you might want to compare a cliff before and after a mudslide, for example, or before and after a wildfire. Or you can compare 2 different parts of the city. So I'm going to bring in the LA no trees for this one. Add that in. And then on the right side, click Add Image. and bring in a comparison of LA with trees. And now we have a swipe that shows us, just a block from each other, how different the city is, depending on where you live. What I like about the swipe is that it's fun. It makes the story interactive for your readers, and it works with maps and images. Okay, so this is where we are in the Word document. We added the swipe with 2 images. Now you're going to add a new slide. And to do that, you click on the little plus sign on the bottom right of your screen, and that adds another slide that you'll see marked as number 2 in your film strip. Okay, so let's move over to number 2. Here it's a nice blank template for us. And we're going to copy and paste that text between the urban heat islands and the word planting. If you like, you can decrease those spacings. Again, I'll triple click or highlight this first line and make it a heading. And I like that, so I'm not going to change it here in the nav bar. It's short, it's sweet. Maybe not so sweet. Urban heat islands. So here I want to add a map. And there are many different maps available. So if you click on the Add Media, we added a swipe in the first slide. Now we're going to add a map. You can add a map that you've made. You can favorite other people's maps. Maybe you're working with a group and you're collaborating. You can add maps that way, or in your organization. So say a colleague or someone creates a map that you really like, you can easily add it. Living Atlas is an amazing source of maps and data and apps for you to use in your stories. And I want to go to the Infrastructure tab and look up, I know there's a map out there about redlining and exposure to urban heat islands. So I'm going to add that map. And here we see the different layers in your map. These are turned off and the first one is turned on. And I want to use that search by location. And for this story, I'm interested in Los Angeles. I know you all are in Boston, so let's take a look over there real quick. And here we can turn on the legend by going to the settings option, excuse me. We can keep that legend open. And here we see the land surface temperature difference, right? So if it's above 0, so it's above average, right? We see the land in red. And if it's cooler than the average temperatures for the city, it's seen in blue. These letters are the Hulk score grades for the different areas. So A is like a place that is rated higher than the D rated area. So you see this correlation, right? Like A tends to be cooler and D tends to be the hotter areas of the city. But actually the story is about Los Angeles. So I'll zoom over there. This is where you set your zoom level. I want people to see this view, and I'll place the map. Okay, so we have our legend. One thing I like to do is not really use this legend here because I don't want my readers to have to try to interpret this and understand it. What I would recommend is putting the legend in the text and saying, areas, I can show real quick, areas in red represent da-da-da-da, right? And then you can double click on the text and choose a color that is the exact text value in your map. So I wasn't planning on showing this, but I think it's important. Here we have a color picker. It's an extension in Chrome. You can use any extension. What I like to do is select the color, copy the hex value, and then I bring it into here. And now the text is red, and I also bold the text just to catch people's attention. That's what I personally recommend. But for today, we'll just use this legend button. They're both helpful. All right, so in your Word document, you saw how to find that map by going to Living Atlas, Infrastructure, searching redlining, adding the map, setting that zoom extent. So now we want to add 3 map actions. One for hotter temperatures, one for cooler temperatures, and one for tree coverage. So I am going to just type it out. So with the block selector, choose that map action, the one with the lightning bolt. And here's our first map action. And the text we'll put in here is hotter temperatures. Now, if you click on this little edit button, we're editing what we want to happen when the reader clicks on that button. So what I like to do is hold the shift button and click and drag. You can use the plus minus zoom, or you can double click. So many different ways to get to the same place. And I'll save that action. So this is what happens. The reader comes to this slide and they look at this hotter temperatures map action. They click on it and it brings them to this view. So again, as the author, I'm not there with the reader. So this is my opportunity to guide the reader to the places of interest, right? I want to take the onus or the burden off of the reader to know where to go. Next up, we add our second out of 3 map actions. And if you're following along in the document, it's the cooler temperatures text. And again, edit the button. So what happens when we click cooler temperatures? I want them to go towards the Beverly Hills area here. And hit save action. And the last one is a little different. So the first 2 changed where the map was zoom extent, how magnified the map is. The third map action will be a little different. So this one is called tree coverage. And click that little edit button. Now, as I mentioned before, the map happens to have a few different layers in it. I'm going to turn off the temperature differences layer and turn on the second layer, tree coverage percentage. And here we can click on the map to learn more. We see that this area is 10.6 degrees Celsius below the city average. It's rated A, meaning it's the best, according to Hulk. And then we see a little more information about the neighborhood characteristics. As comparison, this area is 4 degrees above average. Save that. So let's take a look. Hotter temperatures, cooler temperatures, and tree coverage. So this is what we call map choreography. It's kind of like a dance with your map. So next up in the Word doc, we're going to add some text to close it out. This is what we decided to be as our call to action. Call to actions can be as simple as learning more. It can be contribute to the data set, share your opinion, donate to a certain cause. There's many different possible call to actions. So here's the keep learning. And I'm going to fix this formatting. Hopefully it's only happening to me and no one else. Okay, so go back to the Word document. And now we're going to finish up the story with 2 embed cards. So we'll copy this URL. And as we saw before with that insights chart example, excuse me, we use the embed block. And this is a simple URL, no iframe needed. I'm going to add that using the embed block and copying and pasting that URL. There are 2 different ways you can view your embed block, either as an interactive embed. For me, this is too much going on in the story. I would prefer it as a content card. Excuse me. So what this is doing is you put in the URL and it's pulling in the metadata from the website, right? So the website has some information behind the scenes with a thumbnail, the title, and the description. If you don't like what's automatically pulled in, that's okay. You can create your own custom card details. Maybe you didn't like that it's cut off here, for example. So determine, we can just say shade equity, right? Or we can delete that part. It just depends on what you want to do. You can shorten the description. I like to keep it as is because the ellipses makes me as the reader want to learn more. What else is there? The second and last embed card we will add is to the Benefits of Trees site. Again, click on that block selector, go to the embed option, paste that in. And again, I want the embed card, and there we go. I like the images, so I'm not going to change them. And you might want to end out your story with that separator, that visual indicator that the story is done. We are not done, though, as authors. I want to zhuzh up the story a little bit more. So we're going to the Design tab. There are different themes, out-of-the-box themes we can choose from. If you want a dramatic story, this dark obsidian theme is always the way to go. Ridgeline is kind of like that green environmental feel. Mesa is kind of the natural feel. Title, similar to obsidian, that dramatic feel. As you scroll down to the story, the background gets darker and darker. Little Easter egg, if you click on the title at the top, it brings you to the top of the story. So here we go. And then there's slate, kind of like a newspaper style. So notice with each of these, the buttons change, the quote changes, the color changes, or you could choose your own themes. So let's see if I've made a lot of themes, as you can see. So let's see if there's like a shade. Oh, I know. Someone in my organization, who's on the call, created a theme that I wanted to use, which is the environmental theme. So there's many ways to choose your theme, whether you made the theme yourself, or maybe Harvard decides to create a theme that everyone can use for a consistent look and feel. Now we've got a logo at the top, and we have different views of hyperlinks. Now my insights, which I purposely made that beige color, matches exactly like my background. So it feels like it fits in to the story more than, say, the summit look, right? So that's one other trick you can do. The separators, I decided to make it the same as the logo, but a different color. Let's turn off this design tab. The buttons are more rounded. So you get the gist of what a theme does. It really makes your story stand out, makes it unique. If you are interested in creating your own theme, I'm going to show you how to do it. This kind of ends the build along in a sense. So just watch if you want, or if you want to follow along, you can. So in your My Projects page, again, you can create a story, a collection, or a theme. And here I'm activating the theme builder. You can give the theme a title, change the background color. I love Googling, spring color template, or, just looking at different color templates and using that color picker and using that to create my own theme. It's a fun way to find inspiration. You can change the colors here. I wonder if this is the exact Harvard red. I'm not sure. You can see that this accessibility is not good. The product team is working on a way to show that color contrast ratio here when you're selecting your colors. Make this white as well. And notice as you're making these changes, it automatically shows up in the builder or in the preview. There are a lot of out-of-the-box fonts for you to choose from. But if you want access to thousands of other fonts, you can find them here by choosing from your Google fonts. And the buttons, again, changing that style, maybe a more rounded look. You can change the color, different quote styles. If you want something more dramatic, maybe choose this one. And links, so that's up here at the top. Maybe you want dotted or again, dramatic. The separators, so depends on how designy you want to get, right? So there's out-of-the-box separators. You can change the alignment, or you can add your own custom image, which we did for that environmental theme. With the logo, you upload your logo. It appears at the top. You can add alternative text, again, for that accessibility, and then add a hyperlink. So maybe it takes you to your website. You publish the theme, and then you can find the theme exactly how I did earlier. and you'll find that published theme here. Now, if you have a bunch of stories to create, or if you have a presentation that you want to give, I'll show you one thing that you can use. Excuse me. So we've made our story. We have our theme. The last thing you can do is create a collection. So actually, let's go to the collection that the team made, and I put it in the chat, but someone can put it in the chat again to bring it to the top. But here's a collection of all the stories we shared, planning your story, all of this, and Ross will cover the resources. But I do want to use this as an example of what you can do with collections. So I'm going to go into edit mode, and I see that Ashley Dew created this collection. So it tells me if someone is currently working on it or not, and it's a little nice warning to let me know. So there's different layouts. There's the fancy grid layout. My personal favorite is the magazine because it has that nice cover image. And then we've got this journal layout, which is nice maybe if you want to show steps in your methodology, for example. There are different navigation bars at the top. So if I select one of these, I'll see the tabs at the top, and I can go to different items in the collection. So here's the compact. So there's 15 items in the collection. Here's the tabbed, one of my personal favorites, and bulleted. So it depends on the theme that you're going for. And speaking of theme, again, you can click on this little top left to get back to that grid view. And let's take a look at the different themes and how they look when you add it to the collection. So here's a custom data science theme with the logo. And here's the logo found at the bottom. Let's see. If you want to add something to your collection, you can add a PDF similar to that planning your story document that Ross shared. You can embed a website. Maybe you want to put a YouTube video or upload your own video, an image, or look at your ArcGIS content, whether it's your maps or your stories, your files. Maybe I want to put in that zipped file, applications. Maybe you want to add something from Living Atlas. There are a lot of ways you can integrate your GIS and data science work into your collection. Maybe you have a presentation to give, sharing your thesis, for example. You can use a story and or a collection to do so. Here we're using a collection as a set of resources for your takeaway. So that is all I would like to share with the build along. You learned how to create a story. I can't wait to see the stories you create, and I wish I could join in that competition. You created a theme and a collection. All right, so I'm going to pass it over back to you, Ross.
Jen, just because we have a little bit more time,
yeah,
do you mind showing the publishing workflow? So once you finish the story.
Yeah, I'll share my screen again. And please let me know if there's anything else I can share. I might have missed it.
No, this is great.
Well, now that we have more time, the floodgates have opened. I'm going to talk about more things too. So before you hit publish, there are different story settings. You might want to change what date is shown, maybe the original publication date or the last time you updated it, or you want to hide that date. You want it to feel more evergreen, right? There's social sharing at the top. You can share your stories to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can embed your story in websites. But if you don't want people to share your story, you can hide that. Here, you can set the language of your story. And say I set it to Arabic, for example. It's going to flip everything left to right or right to left, same with Hebrew. And what's great about this is this language is set to English. So now if someone who's Spanish speaking has Spanish set in their browser and they open your story, at the top it'll say, would you like to translate the story? And it'll use whatever translation service your browser has. So if it's Chrome, I think it's Google Translate, and it does its best to translate the story. We're currently working on it's R&D right now, machine learning, using machine learning for the author to automatically translate stories and have different versions of their story that's more accurate than some of these translation services. Another fun one is Google Analytics. You can enable this simply. I use my Gmail account, created Google Analytics, super easy. I copied and pasted my story URL into Google Analytics and got a tracking ID. and you can add a consent message. And what this is good for is to see how many people are looking at your story. Where are they coming from? Where do they go after they leave the story? Where physically there's a map that shows where people are when they look at your story. Are they using a mobile device or a desktop? So you're learning a lot about your readers to improve the reader experience. Okay, so now to your original point, Ross, you can publish your story to many different levels. And I think I saw in the Q&A earlier about security. You know, if you have very private data and you don't want to share it out to the world, you can do many different things. And I think they're going to put it in the chat in the Q&A. You can create a layer with the private information and set your layer in the map to private, sharing with the organization, or to everyone, public. So that kind of sharing level is pervasive across all items in ArcGIS Online, right? So if you have sensitive information in your layer, you might want to keep your layer private and create a view that's public that shows only the information you'd like to share publicly. You can hide certain fields in your data for that public view, right? And the original source is private. For the story, we recommend with everyone, right? Or if it's just an internal story just for your organization, share it just with the org. And you can share the story with a group. So I'm going to share it to everyone and hit publish. It checks the story for issues. They might say, oh, one of your maps wasn't shared publicly. Do you want to share your map publicly too? I'd probably say yes. Now I can copy and paste this link and share this with anyone, and anyone with internet can view your story. Yeah, great question. Ross, feel free to prompt any other things I can share.
That's great. That's great. Thanks so much. I think this has been really helpful, and tease up the office hours that are coming up. So yeah, I can share a couple more resources to close us out, and then we'll open it up for Q&A and sort of workshop any issues or questions that you have. So one of the most helpful resources I tell everyone about is the StoryMaps website. So esri.com/storymaps. Esri.com/storymaps is our product page, but it's more than just kind of an overview of the tool. We have a gallery, resources, and you can also get right into the builder from this location. So if you look at the gallery, you can see stories that our team, as well as folks from the broader storytelling community, have authored. Here you can sort of see them demonstrated with these thumbnails and text. You can also filter this by different categories. So if you had a specific topic or wanted to see, our top picks, humanitarian, health and safety, you can do that really easily. Now, this also brings up a question that I think I saw in the chat, which was, can you embed a story into a website, and what are some of the best practices around that? You can see this is one simple implementation of that. So we have an image, we've got a description, and it's kind of sitting in an image gallery. When you click on it, it opens the story in a new tab. Oftentimes, this is the best sort of reading experience because when you create a story, it was probably meant to have a full browser width, as opposed to being this tiny window, an iframe that you're kind of scrolling through in a website itself. Now, back on our products page here. So once you've seen a lot of example stories, you can also go to the resources tab. The resources tab has all sorts of content, from blog posts to educational instructional stories where you can learn specific techniques. A lot of what we covered today, we go much more in depth here. Anything from planning your story, that worksheet, to a story about 9 steps to great storytelling. You can also see kind of what's new in the product and what's coming. Talked about the theme builder. we go in depth here and provide a lot of resources for continuing sort of on your learning journey to explore that. So with that, I think, I'll just emphasize that check out that collection that Do made. It's a really helpful resource. Anything from getting started with the tool to those example plans that I demoed, and then also the story that we were using to present, as well as a number of other great examples. So we can't wait to see what you create, and are thrilled and excited to be here and be a resource